Hi there. Okay, so I'm going to continue our look at the syntax of this symbolic language SL, the language of sentential logic. The language is called SL, and sentential logic is sometimes called truth functional logic, as I said in the last lecture. And I tend to call it that myself. So what we did at the end of the last lecture was to look at the parts of the language of SL. And what we've seen so far is that there aren't that many parts. It's not a terribly complex language. It has these capital Roman letters, A, B, C, D, and so on, that are used to symbolize simple sentences, such as Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles or Chester loves to swim. These, there aren't just 26 of them. We actually have theoretically an infinite supply of them because we can subscript them. Okay, so sentences of SL, as I said, are either atomic sentences, and these are atomic sentence letters, right? So an atomic sentence is just going to be a sentence letter, or molecular sentences. Okay, so every sentence of SL is either atomic or molecular. Atomic sentences are just the sentence letters. Molecular sentences are built from sentences of SL by means of the sentential connectives of SL that are, which we're going to see very soon, truth functional. And just to review, the 5 connectives are the ampersand, the wedge, the tilde, the horseshoe, and the triple bar. These are roughly translations, or at least they're closely connected to the English words and in the case of the ampersand, or in the case of the wedge, not in case of the tilde, if then for the horseshoe, and if and only if. Only if for the triple bar. We talked about this as a conjunction. I'll talk more about that as we proceed. This is a sentence formed by means of the ampersand is called a conjunction, by means of the wedge is called a disjunction. And again, there's a glossary at the end of each chapter where all of these new terms that are introduced are defined. There is a lot of vocabulary that you're going to have to learn up front. Conjunction, disjunction, negation, conditional, and finally the biconditional. Okay. Oh, and in addition to the atomic sentence letters and the connectives, these are the connectives of SL, we also have punctuation. And we'll see how that works in a while. Punctuation is just a left parenthesis and a right parenthesis. That's all we need. Okay, so what I want to do is to start looking at these logical words, that is, these connectives, and their definitions. And I think what I'm going to do is look at, today I'm going to look at conjunction and disjunction, and then I'll save the others, I think, for next week. I don't want to load too much into this since there's going to be a quiz on Friday that will include the material from last week as well. So what I want to do now is to take a look at conjunction. So let's consider an and sentence. Chester loves to swim, same old simple sentences. And Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles. Okay, so this sentence is a conjunction. It has the structure of a conjunction, and the parts of a conjunction are called the conjuncts. Right, so a conjunction has two conjuncts. And in this case, here's the first conjunct, and here's the second conjunct. Every conjunction has just two conjuncts, not more than that. And this ampersand is a truth functional connective. That is, any sentence that is formed by means of the ampersand is such that its truth value is a function of the truth values of the component sentences. And so what we're going to do is we're going to give a definition of the ampersand, this truth functional connective of SL, by means of what we call its characteristic truth table. This is going to provide the definition of the ampersand. Okay, so let's think about it. Let's go back to this particular conjunction. This sentence it has the form of a conjunction, and let's say Chester. I'm going to write down S for Chester loves to swim, and then an ampersand, and P for Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles. And what we want to think about is how this sentence fares under all possible circumstances, so to speak. So we were thinking about, back in chapter 1, we were thinking about situations in which sentences are true or false, circumstances in which sentences are true or false. And now we're going to think a little bit more generally about what are the situations that might obtain here that are relevant to the truth value of the conjunction Chester loves to swim and Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles. Well, I'm going to tabulate them over here. So I'm going to write down the component sentences here. So S here again is for, S stands for, let's see if I can do this in using some color. The S stands for this, right? Chester loves to swim. And the P stands for this. Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles, right? Okay, I'm just using these sentence letters to stand for those simple sentences of English. Let me go back to black. Okay, so let's think about it. One possibility is that both of the sentences are true, right? That Chester does love to swim and Charlotte does enjoy logic puzzles. And if I assert the conjunction of those two, when both of the components are true, if I say Chester loves to swim and Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles and both components, both conjuncts are true, I hope that you see that the entire conjunction is true in that situation. Okay, there's another situation. Suppose it's true that Chester loves to swim, but Charlotte does not enjoy logic puzzles. In fact, it's false that she enjoys logic puzzles. And once again, I assert the conjunction, Chester loves to swim and Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles. And that conjunction has the truth value false. I hope you see that. Okay. How many other possible situations do we need to think about? Well, there's the one where they're both true. There's the one where one's true and one's false. Oh, wait, I guess there's this one where that one's false and that one's true. Are there others? Well, yeah, there's the one where both of them are false. Does that do it? Are there any other possible situations we need to consider? And no, this will do it. There are 4 possible situations that we need to look at. And so what we're going to do is we're going to determine what the truth value of this conjunction is under each of these 4 possible situations, so to speak. We've done 2. let's move down to the third row here. Suppose that Chester does not love to swim. It's false that he loves to swim, but it's true that Charlotte enjoys logic puzzles. Well, now we've got something I hope you recognize as being false. And now finally, suppose both of the components are false. He does not love to swim. She does not enjoy logic puzzles. The entire conjunction is false. Okay, so here was a particular example. This was a particular conjunction of SL in which we kind of gathered our thoughts, but it's not what I'm going to be calling the characteristic truth table for the conjunction. For that, we want to be a bit more general. And what I'm going to use for that are boldface capital letters. So I'm going to use, and the way I'm going to make it look bold is by doing that. So that's a bold, that's bold, this is bold type, right? And that's bold, right? So these are called meta variables. I'm going to talk more about this in the future, but right now I'm just going to introduce them, and I will clarify any confusion shortly, perhaps in the next lecture. These are called meta variables, and they range over sentences of SL. They are not sentence letters themselves. They range over sentences of SL. So if I were to do, this is the characteristic truth table for the ampersand. So instead of using sentence letters, so these are sentence letters of SL. These are meta variables. They're not sentence letters. They are variables that range over sentence letters. So basically, what this is going, and again, there are four possibilities, right? If P and Q are any old sentences at all of SL, maybe atomic, maybe molecular, maybe quite complex molecular sentences. If they're both true, the conjunction is true, and otherwise the conjunction is false. So this is the characteristic truth table for the ampersand. Again, these boldface P's and Q's and R's and so on that we're going to be using are meta variables. They range over sentence letters. They are not actual, they range over sentences, I'm sorry. They're not actually sentence letters. They range over sentences. They're variables in the same sense as, x plus 1 equals 3, right? So that's a variable. And this ranges over, in algebra, this ranges over numbers. It's not a number itself, right? It's a variable that we use to range over numbers. So this says that no matter what number you pick, if you add 1 to it, it's going to turn out, the sum is going to turn out to be 3. And then you can solve and say, oh, well, then that x has got to be 2. Okay, so these are variables in the same sense that the variables that you've encountered in algebra and so on. Okay, so this is our definition. This is our definition of the ampersand. And as we see, it was not at all difficult for us to derive this characteristic truth table for the ampersand, because it really does, the ampersand really does very closely match the way that we use the word and in English. There are cases where sentences with and are not actually or ought not to be translated into SL as conjunction. And there are also cases where an English sentence actually is a truth functional conjunction, but it doesn't even contain the word and. And I want to take a look at a couple of examples of what I have in mind in a moment. When you look at the text talks about paraphrasing sentences, and they give you kind of a recipe for how to paraphrase an and sentence, a conjunction, how to paraphrase an or sentence, a disjunction, and so on. So they suggest a particular way of paraphrasing, but I actually find their suggestions to be cumbersome and not all that helpful. If you find them helpful, then go ahead. That's great. But I'm not going to insist that we paraphrase a la the text. There are going to be occasions where we are going to do a bit of paraphrasing of the English sentence before we reach the final translation of the English sentence into SL. I'm going to look at a couple of examples now. So anyway, this is our characteristic truth table where P and Q, these bold-faced capital P's and Q's, are meta variables, not sentence letters. Okay. Let's look at some examples of sentences that are conjunctions, but require a little bit of paraphrasing before we can translate them directly into SL. So here's one example. Charlotte is a chubby calico cat, that is. Charlotte is a chubby calico. Okay, so that's a sentence that it does not have the word and in it, but I think it's properly translated as a truth functional conjunction. And so this is going to require a little bit of paraphrasing before we get to the full translation of the sentence into SL. So I think what it's saying is that Charlotte is chubby and Charlotte is a calico. Right? So now we can have, say, H stands for Charlotte is chubby. I have too many C's in here, sorry. And then say A stands for, notice how I'm giving a dictionary, so it's very clear what my atomic sentence letters are standing for. A stands for Charlotte is a calico. And recognizing that this is an appropriate paraphrase of our original sentence, we can now go directly to our full translation of the English sentence, and we get H ampersand A. And that's our translation of our original sentence. Okay? Charlotte is chubby and Charlotte is a calico. Even though there's no occurrence of and in that sentence. There are times when there is an and, but you have to do a little bit of paraphrasing in order to get to a full translation. So, for instance, here's a simple example: the powder contains sulfur and magnesium. So here was our first example. Here's a second example. The powder contains sulfur and magnesium. And we do have an and there, right? We do have an occurrence of and. But we have to do a little bit of paraphrasing before we can get to our full translation into SL, because it's not, this and is not occurring between two sentences. And so we have to paraphrase, so we get the powder contains sulfur. I mean, this is hardly complicated, but I just wanted to point out that it does require a bit of paraphrasing. And the powder contains magnesium. And now we can have S, I'm not going to write out the full dictionary, but S stands for the powder contains sulfur, and M stands for the powder contains magnesium, and now we put an ampersand between them, where it's very clear what's going on here. But initially, we had to paraphrase the sentence, figuring out that these were going to be our conjuncts of the conjunction. Okay? Not a terribly complex paraphrase, but a paraphrase nonetheless. Let's look at another example. So here's a sentence that does not contain the word and, but I do think that it is properly analyzed as a truth functional conjunction. Neither my son nor I speaks Icelandic. Okay, neither my son nor I speaks Icelandic. Well, I think that this is properly analyzed as a conjunction, as I said. And what are the conjuncts of that conjunction? I think it is, my son does not speak Icelandic, and I do not speak Icelandic. So we would have, say, I stands for I don't speak Icelandic. And when you do translations, you really do need to supply a dictionary because different people might choose different sentence letters to stand for different things. So I stands for I don't speak Icelandic, and S stands for my son does not speak Icelandic. And so the whole thing becomes I don't speak Icelandic and my son doesn't speak Icelandic. We could actually go further and get this not out of there, but we haven't talked about not yet, so I'm just going to leave it in there for now. Okay, so that's a translation of this sentence. Again, does not contain the word I. Here's another one. Sometimes we have sentences with relative clauses, and here's an example. Your homework is on the kitchen floor. Which hasn't been mopped in weeks. Okay, so this sentence, it has this relative clause, which hasn't been mopped in weeks. It does not contain the word and, but I think it's properly analyzed, translated as a truth functional conjunction. Your homework is on the floor, which hasn't been mopped for a week. So if we have H stand for your homework is on the kitchen floor, and M stand for the kitchen floor hasn't been mopped in weeks. See, we had to do a little bit of paraphrasing here. And the H stands for your homework is on the kitchen floor. Then the whole sentence becomes that. Your homework's on the kitchen floor, and the kitchen floor has not been mopped in weeks. So I think that, again, this is does not contain the word and, but it's a nice illustration of how sometimes these relative clauses indicate that the sentence is indeed properly analyzed as a truth functional conjunction. Okay, so these were examples, 1, 2, 3, and 4 were examples of sentences that are not obviously conjunctions, but are properly analyzed as conjunctions. Conversely, there are sentences that do contain the word and that are not properly, that ought not to be translated as conjunctions. So for instance, back to our Latin American capitals, Lima and San Jose are over 1,000 miles apart. Well, this has the word and in it, but it clearly isn't. I hope it's clear to you. This is not a conjunction. It's not a conjunction of Lima is 1,000 miles apart and San Jose is 1,000 miles apart. It's not a conjunction at all. Not a truth functional conjunction. Okay, another example. Go away. 20 students were selected and given free ice cream. 20 students were selected and given free ice cream. Well, at first blush, that sounds like a conjunction, right? It's got this and in it. But if you translate that as 20 students were selected and 20 students were given free ice cream, that doesn't capture what's going on in that English sentence, because it's pretty clear that the same 20 students that were selected are the ones that got the free ice cream. But this allows for the fact that one group of 20 students were selected, but a different group of 20 students were given free ice cream. So that really doesn't capture what's going on in this sentence. So this also is not a truth functional conjunction. There's no way that we can get at this reference back and forth by using the ampersand. Here's kind of an interesting example. Chester is a famous pianist. Well, that has the same grammatical structure as Charlotte is a chubby calico, right? Charlotte is a chubby calico, which we analyzed as Charlotte is chubby and Charlotte is a calico. And Chester is a famous piano. Should that be Chester is famous and Chester is a famous pianist. Chester is famous and Chester is a pianist. Let me just write down what Chester is famous. That's what the F, I'm suggesting the F could stand for. And P stands for Chester is a pianist. So that now we're looking at what happens if we analyze this sentence, which has exactly the same grammatical structure as Charlotte is a chubby calico. But if we analyze it in the same way, we end up with this, that Chester is famous and Chester is a pianist. But that doesn't get at what's going on in the sentence, because this could be true if Chester's famous for for being a really good juggler. Where'd that come from? I don't know. And he also happens to be a pianist, but not a very good one, and certainly not a famous one, right? So he could be famous for something other than being a pianist. So that also does not capture what's going on in the English sentence. So you really need to think about what's happening in the sentence rather than just translating these things reflexively. Okay, so that's also not, I think, appropriately translated as a truth functional conjunction. How about, let's look at one more. The professor gave him a C, the grade of a C, and he went home and wept. Okay. Do you think that that's properly translated as, if P stands for the professor gave him a C, and W stands for he went home and wept, do you think that that's a good translation of that sentence? P and W, the professor went home, the professor gave him a C, and he went home and wept. The student went home and wept. I hope you see that that's not the case, right? This does not capture what's going on in this sentence, because what's going on in the sentence with this and is that there's some causal connection between the professor giving him a C and his going home and weeping, right? Because this allows for the possibility of, yeah, the professor gave him a C, that's true. And yeah, it's true he went home and wept, but he wept because a friend had hurt his feelings terribly, right? So his weeping might not have anything to do with the grade the professor gave him. So this is being used causally, and we can't capture that using the truth functional ampersand. Similarly, the team won and the crowd went crazy. It's a similar example. If you did that as the team won and the crowd went crazy, this doesn't capture what's going on here, because what's intended in this sentence with this and is that the crowd's going crazy is because of the team's winning. But this could be the team won, but the crowd went crazy because they spotted, Beyonce in the stands or something. I'm really bad at coming up with examples today. So this could be true, but not capture what's really going on in this sentence, where there's a causal relationship between these two events. Okay, so here's another. I think I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. Okay. No, there's one more that I'll do that's kind of interesting. How about this one? Megan, Megan, I think this is how she spells her name, and Harry, you know who I'm talking about here? The prince and what's Megan's last name? Markle? In case you hadn't heard, they're married. Okay. Megan and Harry are married. Oops, I put an ampersand. I didn't intend to put an ampersand. It was just I wanted to put an and there. Megan and Harry are married. Is this a truth functional connective? Well, I'm not sure I'm going to answer this question. So I'll leave it for you to think about a little bit. Is it properly translated as Megan is married and Harry is married? Is that the proper translation for it? Or is there something else going on in the sentence that's not captured by translating it as a truth functional connective? Well, I can't help myself, so I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. Look, one possibility is, it depends on what you mean. I think that this is actually an ambiguous sentence in English, right? This could be true if Megan's married to one person and Harry's married to a different person, right? That this truth functional conjunction allows for that possibility. Or it could be the case that they're married to one another. But what we can't get, this does not get at what most likely we intend by this sentence, namely that not only is Megan married and Harry's married, but they're actually married to one another. Okay, so this doesn't quite do it. Okay, so that's so much for conjunction. That was kind of a long-winded explanation of conjunction. I'm going to move on. I'm going to do one more connective today in this lecture. And I'm going to now talk about disjunction. And then that, I think, will be the end of the lectures for the second module. Okay, disjunction. So the word or in English acts as a sentential connective. We stick or between two sentences and we end up with a compound sentence. Okay. And in SL, the wedge is the corresponding word in SL. Okay? But I want to talk a little bit about this. And here's an example that I kind of like, but it's not always as successful as I would like it to be. But let's see how it goes. So suppose that, you got somebody who gardens and she's been bothered all summer by pests, groundhogs, rabbits, squirrels. They're all eating this, that, and the other thing in her garden. And she's planted a couple of rows of corn in her yard, and she's been waiting to harvest the corn. And she looks at it one day and she says, tomorrow's the day I'm going to harvest this corn. She invites some people over for a corn party. She gets up the next morning and she finds that the corn has been destroyed. Something has eaten all of the corn, just as it was, it was perfect for harvest. Something came along and ate all of the corn. And, she knows that groundhogs like corn, and she knows that squirrels really like corn. So she asserts, the corn, in an exasperated tone perhaps, the corn was eaten by groundhogs or squirrels. By the way, I no longer have a groundhog problem. I have gotten rid of all my groundhog, knock on wood. I've captured them all. Okay, the corn was eaten by groundhogs or squirrels. And she doesn't know which one. She doesn't know which one. And she's not precluding the possibility that the groundhogs and squirrels got together and had a big party. And groundhogs ate the corn and the squirrels ate the corn. But if she asserts this, what she's denying is that they're both false, right? So if we paraphrase this as the groundhogs ate the corn or the squirrels ate the corn, and I'm going to translate that into SL in this way. Come back. Right, the groundhogs ate the corn, or what am I doing? Or the squirrels. It's one again, writing and speaking at the same time. Or the squirrels ate the corn, right? So the question is, how does this fare under the various possible situations? Remember we said they could both be true. This could be true, that could be false. This could be false, that could be true. Or they could both be false, right? These are all the possible situations. This exhausts all the possible situations. Okay, so what's absolutely clear is, if it turned out the rabbits had done it, that is, both disjuncts, the parts of the disjunction, if both disjuncts are false, it's false, right? If it turned out, suppose you put a nanny cam out there and she sees, oh my God, it wasn't groundhogs, it wasn't squirrels, it was rabbits. I said something false. And suppose, we're going to move up from the bottom. Suppose now that there were no groundhogs in sight when she watched what was recorded by the nanny cam. But yeah, the squirrels just went to town, right? So that makes that look not like it's a T anymore. So if in this case, where the groundhogs didn't do anything, the squirrels ate a lot of corn, then it's true if I assert the disjunction. Same thing here. Groundhogs, the groundhogs, she's got it on video. The groundhogs were eating the corn, no squirrels in sight, and she asserts the disjunction. That's going to be true. The question is this case. And what I said about this is that I think that if I assert the corn was eaten by groundhogs or squirrels, it doesn't preclude the possibility that when I review the recording on the nanny cam, I see the squirrels and the groundhogs having a big party together, putting a true there. So if they both ate it, then I haven't said anything false. Now, Some of you listening to this are probably saying, you know what? No, I think that should be a false there, because what we mean by or is one or the other, but not both. And what I was trying to do with this gardening example was to come up with an example where many of you, if not all of you, would recognize, oh yeah, this, what I'm putting in blue here, is really what we mean. It's really how the disjunction fares under each of these four possible situations. That if they both eat, it turns out they both ate the corn, then I haven't said anything false. But some of you, nevertheless, are thinking, no, 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 I think this is the right way to define the disjunction, that it's true only when both disjuncts are, when the disjuncts are different in truth value, when exactly one of the disjuncts is true, and otherwise it's false. Okay, so that disagreement, which, you know, we might have had an interesting conversation if we were in the classroom, and I'm trying to duplicate that to the extent that I can. What this little story perhaps shows is that there are actually in English two meanings of the word or. One of them is what I've got in blue here, and that's called the inclusive or. That is, inclusive. Where you've got true, 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 false. It's false only when, it's false only when both disjuncts are false and it's otherwise true. So it's kind of like an and or. And then there's another meaning of or in English, and that is the exclusive or. And that is what I've got circled in red here, where what we mean by the exclusive or is one or, you know, only one of the disjuncts, exactly one of the disjuncts is true in order for the disjunction to be true. So we'd put a false here. And I think that there are plenty of cases in English of both kinds of ors. You know, some people sort of want to dig in and say, no, or only has the exclusive sense in English. It never has the inclusive sense. And there are lots and lots of examples of or being used exclusively. So for instance, if you go to a restaurant and the menu says, for dessert, you may have the brownie or the blackberry pie. It's pretty clear that you can't have both of them, right? Then or is being used exclusively. And I think that, you know, it's not hard for you to think of lots of other examples where or is being used exclusively. What I've experienced is that there are these people who dig in and say, no, this is the only sense of or, and just like refuse to acknowledge that there is this sense, the inclusive sense of or. So let me give an example that I hope will dispel that. Okay, so actually this is for real. In the Harvard University Philosophy Department handbook, they have a handbook, like, you know, about like how to be a philosophy major. You might read that a student, you know, under what circumstances has a student satisfied the logic requirement? Because at Harvard, like just about every university, in order to major in philosophy, you must take a logic course. And at Harvard, the logic course is called Philosophy 140. And in another lifetime, I was actually a teaching assistant for Philosophy 140. So the requirement is given in this way. The student, this is the condition under which you have satisfied the logic requirement. The student takes the logic course, Philosophy 140, or, see there's that or, the student passes the departmental exam. Right, so they have an exam. So you might say, yeah, a student might say, I already know a lot of logic. I don't want to take the course. And they say, okay, prove it. Here's an exam. Let's see how you do on it, right? And if you pass the exam, then you satisfy the logic requirement without actually having taken Philosophy 140. Okay, so this is the way, this is how you satisfy the logic requirement. It's this disjunctive thing. Okay, this is Harvard, right? So suppose, think about a Harvard student. Suppose you've got a Harvard student who both takes and passes Philosophy 140 and takes the department, oh, I forgot to, and takes the departmental exam and passes it. Is the Harvard Philosophy Department going to say, nope, you haven't satisfied the requirement because you both took the logic course and passed the departmental exam? Sorry, you haven't satisfied it. Well, that's crazy, right? So I think this is a nice example where you've got a disjunction where you've got two true disjuncts, but clearly the whole thing is true. You have this overachieving Harvard student who takes the course and takes the exam. Nobody's going to say, sorry, you can't graduate because you haven't satisfied the logic requirement. And also when you're looking at courses, you might often see a prerequisite for a course. So a prerequisite, say for a biology, might be Bio 13 or junior standing. That's a prereq for some biology course. Like, there's just no way that if you've both taken Bio 13 and you're a junior, there's just no way they're going to say, nope, you haven't satisfied the prerequisite, right? So here's another example of or being used inclusively. And there are many, many such examples. So I do strongly believe that, and I hope I've convinced you, that there are two meanings of the word or in English. The meaning that we're going to attach to the wedge is the inclusive meaning. Wedge means inclusive or. And so the characteristic truth table for the disjunction is this. And again, I'm going to use these boldface meta variables. So here's the characteristic truth table for disjunction. Right, so over here I've got, these are the four possibilities. They're both disjuncts are true, one's true, one's false, one's true, or they're both false. And the characteristic truth table for the wedge is this, that it's only false when both disjuncts are false and otherwise it's true. So this is exactly what we mean by inclusive or. Okay. That said, when you do some of the translation exercises in the book, you're absolutely welcome to just systematically translate or using the wedge, taking it to be inclusive, unless you just can't bear it. I mean, there's some cases where you might have the construction either or, and that does have the connotation of exclusivity. But I think it's fine if you just translate or as the wedge. If you don't want to, there are ways that we can capture the exclusive or in our language SL. But I just wanted to make it really clear that this is the meaning that we attach to this connective, which is one of our connectives of SL. Okay, I'm going to end here. In the next lecture, when I pick up, we still have to think about 3 more connectives. We have to look at the tilde, which is roughly not. We have to look at the horseshoe, which is roughly if-then. And we have to look at the triple bar, which is if and only if. So I'm going to do that in the next lecture. And that will be, I think this is enough material for the first quiz. So that's going to be the first lecture of Module 3. So that's something to look forward to. Stay tuned. And I hope to see some of you in office hour on Thursday. And I know, actually, I'm doing this during Zhana's, I'm taping this during Zhana's office hour. And Tianyi has an office hour on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. I think that's right. Okay. I hope all of that's clear to you. And I'm signing off for now. Oh, I will, by the way, send out an announcement in which I make very, very clear lots of things about mechanically, technically, how you're going to take the quiz. So I will make sure that everybody understands that. Okay, signing off until next time.